Someone recently asked me, Pastor Mike, if God is all-knowing, does that invalidate the idea of free will? All right, apparently you and I need to turn up our brain power for a second and think deeply about a pretty interesting question. If God is all-knowing, and the fact is he is, Jesus says that God knows the number of hairs on our head. He knows every time a sparrow falls to the ground. He knows the past, the present, the future. In fact, I love to say that because God is eternal, he actually stands outside of time itself, and he can see everything that has ever happened, is happening, and will ever happen, and he can see it at the exact same time. Ooh, how about that to keep you up at night and get you thinking about the glory and the bigness of God? So God absolutely is all-knowing. He knows today if I was going to wear jeans or black pants. He knows what color socks you're wearing, or if you're wearing no socks at all. He knows everything that could possibly be known about everything. And so the question is, if God knows everything, does that invalidate the idea of free will? So today when you put on whatever pair of pants, God said, "Oh, I knew that." Did somehow like that determine what pair of pants you were going to put on? If you chose to sin or to obey God, if you were impatient or patient, and God already knew whether you're going to sin or obey him, well, does that somehow take out the choice in the matter that you and I make? Great question. And I'm going to grab my Bible and turn to Matthew 23, the words of Jesus, to find a good answer. Some of you might know Matthew 23 is where Jesus is going off like he has never gone off on the religious leaders in Jerusalem. This is during Holy Week. Jesus is right there. He's about to die, and he feels and sees the full weight of their hypocrisy. This is the chapter where he calls them hypocrites and snakes and a brood of vipers. They don't practice what they preach. They tell everyone to do all these things, but they themselves don't help in acts of Christian love. And at the end of that harsh rebuke, Jesus says these words. I'm in Matthew 23, starting in verse 37. "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent to you, how often have I longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing." You weren't willing, Jesus said. When he looked at their unbelief, he didn't say, well, that was kind of God's plan, or, well, God knew this was going to happen. No, he looks them, he laments over them and says, how I wanted you to follow me. I wanted to gather you under my loving, forgiving wings like a hen does with her chicks, but you, Jerusalem, were not willing. This is one of the many passages that reminds me to hold the tension between human free will and God's total sovereignty. God knows and controls all things, and yet so many Bible passages say that we have a responsibility for the choices that we make. In other words, if I'm impatient with my children today, or if I am proud and selfish with my wife, if I scream at a driver on the car ride home after church, I can't say, well, that God knew that was God's plan. Nope. I had free will and I chose to sin, and I have to take responsibility for that. Now, on the topic of free will, we could talk about a lot of other things. It's actually a really dense, layered topic theologically. For example, we don't have the free will to save ourselves or to create faith in our heart. The Bible says we are born dead in sin and hostile to God. That's Ephesians 2 and Romans chapter 8. And so God has to use not just his knowledge, but his power to change our hearts and give us a new heart. But after God has given us this new heart, we can say in so many ways that we have the free will to choose. And he knows whether we're going to choose to follow the path of Jesus in love and compassion and selflessness or not. So we have to embrace and step into that responsibility. We celebrate the fact that God knows the future. He's going to watch out for us. And compelled by the forgiveness of Jesus, we use the free will we have as Christians to serve God with our whole heart, our whole soul, our whole mind, and our whole strength. I pray today that you have the biblical wisdom and the humility to hold those two things in tension, the all-knowing nature of God and human free will that he has given to his children.
Hey, thanks for listening to Taboo Questions with me, Pastor Mike Novotny. You can find even more questions on timeofgrace.org/taboo questions and in my book entitled Taboo, Topics Christians Should Be Talking About But Don't. Just look for the link in the episode notes.